Welcome to Inspiring Tales. Today I will tell you a story about an estranged family with a troubled past comes together through the sport of mixed martial arts. Don't miss this powerful and emotional tale of two brothers fighting for their dreams and their relationship. Tommy Ridley returns home after a long absence to visit his father, Paddy. As he enters the house, he notices that it lacks a feminine touch, and Paddy comments that he's given up on finding a woman who can take a punch. Tommy, however, is not interested in a coffee and instead wants to have a drink with his father. Paddy, a recovering alcoholic, is about to reach a major milestone of 1,000 days sober. However, Tommy brings up the past and confronts Paddy about his abusive behavior towards Tommy's mother. Paddy struggles to contain his emotions as Tommy confronts him about his actions. On his daughter's birthday, Brendan Conlon, Tommy's brother, is transformed into a princess as part of the celebration. His wife, Tess, is a little upset with him for going over budget with the gifts for the party. After the celebration is over, Tess heads off to work at a pub, leaving Brendan in charge of putting the girls to bed. If he behaves himself and waits for her until she gets home, Tess promises to reward him with some intimate attention. While at Colt's gym, Tommy sees a report on MMA Live about a wealthy businessman named Riley hosting a major MMA tournament called Sparta, with a prize of $5 million for the winner. Tommy decides to renew his monthly subscription at the gym where he used to train. As he works out, he notices a poster advertising the Sparta tournament. While he's working out alone, he sees a fighter nicknamed Mad Dog confidently defeating another fighter and boasting about it. The gym owner, Colt, approaches Tommy and asks him if he knows any other fighters who might be interested in competing. Colt offers to pay them $200 for their participation. Tommy tells Colt that he wants to fight Mad Dog, but Colt initially refuses his request. As Tommy is packing up his belongings to leave, Mad Dog taunts him and Tommy turns back to Colt and asks again if he can fight. Colt agrees, saying that if anything goes wrong it will be his responsibility, since Tommy has signed a waiver. The fight begins with Mad Dog on the defensive. One of the spectators records the fight as Tommy dominates Mad Dog, eventually dropping him to the ground with a series of knee strikes to the face and a knockout punch. The crowd is shocked at how easily Tommy won the fight. Tommy approaches Colt and asks for the $200 he was promised, and Colt agrees to pay him. Brendan, a physics teacher, captivates his class with an engaging experiment that demonstrates Newton's second law. His students love his teaching style. After school, Brendan meets with his financial advisor, who informs him that his mortgage payments are overdue. Brendan explains that he had to mortgage his house to pay for his daughter's heart transplant. The advisor seems unconcerned and tells Brendan that he has 90 days to pay off the debt or face foreclosure. Brendan realizes that he won't be able to pay off the debt in time, and the advisor suggests that he consider filing for bankruptcy. Brendan is overwhelmed by the severity of the situation and worries about how he will be able to keep his home. Paddy is reminiscing about the past as he watches old footage of a young Tommy wrestling match, where he won 7 gold medals. Paddy was Tommy's coach at the time, but his methods were considered controversial by some. Suddenly, Colt appears at Paddy's door looking for Tommy. Paddy asks Colt what he wants with Tommy, and Colt explains that Tommy recently beat up the #1 middleweight contender in the world, and he's just trying to gather some information about him. Paddy tells Colt that if he wants to know anything about Tommy, he'll have to ask Tommy himself and shuts the door. Brendan tells his wife on the phone that he's going to work a night shift as a bouncer at a club to earn extra money. However, he actually participates in an underground MMA fight in a parking lot against a fighter known as the Mutilator, Mike. The fight starts with Mike showing off his agility and landing a strong punch. Brendan quickly retaliates with a few of his own and manages to knock Mike to the ground. He continues to deliver repeated punches to Mike's face while he's down, eventually winning the fight. The crowd boos Brendan as their favorite fighter has lost. The organizers tell Brendan that he must win 2 more fights to take home the prize. Tess is surprised when Brendan arrives home with bruises covering his face and body. When she asks what happened, he admits that he lied about his job as a bouncer and has returned to his old ways of fighting for money. Although he had previously promised Tess that he would give up this dangerous activity, their financial struggles have left him feeling desperate. Despite her concern for his safety, Tess remains supportive and promises to help find a solution to their financial issues without resorting to violence. She implores Brendan to stop fighting and find a safer means of making a living. Tommy visits his father, Paddy, at the diner where he works and excitedly tells him about an upcoming fighting tournament with a huge cash prize. Tommy wants Paddy, who used to be a professional fighter, to train him for the competition. Paddy reluctantly agrees, knowing that Tommy has been struggling with addiction. Paddy tells Tommy that he needs to quit taking pills if he wants to train with him, just like they used to in the old days. Paddy knows his son well and is determined to help him overcome his vices and succeed in the tournament. As Brendan enters his classroom, his students are abuzz with rumors that they saw him participating in an MMA fight. Upon seeing Brendan's black eye, they confirm that the rumor is true. Despite the commotion, Brendan begins his lesson as usual. However, shortly thereafter, he is called into the principal's office by Joe. There, Joe informs Brendan that the superintendent is coming to visit and demands an explanation for Brendan's involvement in the fight. During his meeting with the principal and the superintendent, Brendan is confronted with the fact that he failed to mention his past as a professional fighter in the UFC on his resume. As a result, he has been suspended from his job as a teacher until the next semester, without pay. Desperate to make ends meet, Brendan proposes to Tess that he return to fighting in low-level matches to bring in some income. Although Tess is hesitant, she realizes that their financial situation leaves them with few other options. Reluctantly, she agrees to Brendan's plan. When Brendan visits the gym, he runs into an old acquaintance, Frank. Frank apologizes for not keeping in touch and is pleased to see Brendan. Brendan confides in Frank about his financial struggles and the possibility of losing his house to the bank. Discreetly, he asks Frank to train him to get back on his feet by returning to fighting. Frank is hesitant, pointing out that Brendan was never a particularly skilled fighter even at his best and doubts he has what it takes to compete against real opponents, rather than just random people in parking lots. Despite Frank's reservations, Brendan persists, explaining that he is desperate and that Tess is aware of his plan. Frank ultimately agrees to train Brendan, but warns him that he will not be able to give him his full attention due to his own commitments training with Marco for the Sparta tournament. Despite the limitations, Brendan is grateful for Frank's help. In the evening, Paddy pays a visit to Brendan, who is not pleased to see him. Paddy explains that it is a special day for him as it marks 1,000 days of sobriety, and he wants to celebrate by having a meal together. However, Brendan is uninterested and tells Paddy that just because it is a special day for him does not mean it is a special day for Brendan. As Brendan walks away, Paddy reveals that Tommy is back and training with him at his house. Brendan is surprised and hurt that Tommy has not mentioned anything about this to him, as they are brothers. He is also angry that they are training together as if nothing happened, especially since Tommy has always been Paddy's favorite son due to his superior fighting skills. Even when they were younger, Paddy never trained Brendan, causing a lasting rift between the two brothers. Paddy asks Brendan to forgive him and make room in his heart for their relationship to be repaired. Despite his reservations, Brendan ultimately decides to forgive Paddy, but he still does not trust him. Coldly, he closes the door on Paddy and walks away. Later, Tommy arrives at the gym and is excited to learn from Colt that he has secured a spot for him in the Sparta tournament. Later, Tommy makes a phone call to check on a woman he knows, reminding her that he has not forgotten his promise to her. Tommy had served in the army with her husband, who died while on duty. Before his death, Tommy had promised to take care of the woman and ensure that she was okay. As Tommy and Brendan prepare for the Sparta tournament, they learn about the unique format of the competition. Only 16 fighters will participate, and the winner will be the sole survivor. Among the competitors is Koba, a formidable fighter from Russia who has never lost a match. Tess becomes aware of the Sparta tournament, and Koba's reputation while watching the news on TV. As Brendan trains with Marco, Frank's top contender for the Sparta tournament, he manages to defeat Marco in a sparring match, causing Marco to tap out. After 4 weeks of intense training, Frank receives some unsettling news. During a training session, Marco has a serious accident, and Frank is forced to call an ambulance. When they arrive at the hospital, Frank is told that Marco will not be able to participate in the Sparta tournament. Despite the disappointment, Brendan approaches Frank and offers to take Marco's place in the competition. Frank is hesitant at first, but ultimately agrees to make some calls and see what can be done to allow Brendan to compete in the tournament. The following day, Brendan receives a call from Frank informing him that he has successfully secured a spot for him in the Sparta tournament. When Tess finds out, she is furious with Brendan for making this decision without consulting her. She is not motivated by the potential prize money, but rather by her concern for Brendan's safety. She fears that he could end up paralyzed or worse killed if he participates in the tournament. Despite her objections, Brendan argues that if he does not try to compete in the Sparta tournament, they will lose their house to the bank in just 3 weeks. He pleads with Tess to support him, but she remains steadfast in her refusal to watch him fight again. The Sparta Super Bowl is in full swing, with the toughest middleweight fighters from around the world converging to prove their strength and determination. The competition is fierce as each fighter strives to come out on top and be crowned the strongest in the world. As the Sparta Super Bowl gets underway, Brendan is not viewed as a major threat by the other fighters. When Tommy and Brendan spot each other in the lobby, Tommy decides to avoid his brother. However, news breaks that Tommy is not only a dark horse in the Sparta Cup, but also a hero in the Iraq War. One of the soldiers recognizes Tommy from a video and thanks him for saving his life. This attention makes Tommy uncomfortable, and he goes for a walk to clear his head. Brendan and Tommy eventually run into each other outside, and although they keep their distance and are tense, Brendan suggests they have coffee together. Tommy refuses and insists that he is fine on his own. Tommy left the family 14 years ago, and Brendan stayed behind for Tess. Brendan tries to show Tommy pictures of his family, but Tommy dismisses him and reiterates that he does not consider Brendan his brother after he chose Pops and Tess over him and their mother. Brendan tries to explain that he has forgiven Pops, just like he has forgiven Tommy and their mother, but this only angers Tommy. Tommy accuses Brendan of being full of crap and not following through on their plan. He then storms off, leaving Brendan alone. The Sparta Super Bowl is a highly anticipated event, with the stadium packed with spectators eager to witness the biggest mixed martial arts spectacle in history. Tommy competes in the first round of the tournament, and quickly becomes an overnight sensation, with many people calling him a war hero. Despite his impressive performance, however, very few people know anything about him or his background. The Sparta tournament is a chance for Tommy to prove himself and make a name for himself in the world of mixed martial arts. Despite his impressive showing in the Sparta tournament, Tommy has managed to remain largely unknown to the public. He has skipped all interviews, has no sponsors, no entrance music, and has not even had his picture taken. Despite breaking every rule, Tommy has still become the darling of the audience, captivating fans with his impressive fighting skills and mystery. He has managed to remain Google-proof, leaving very little information about himself available online. As Tommy's match gets underway, the commentators speculate that he is only in the Sparta tournament due to luck, rather than any real skill. However, Tommy quickly proves them wrong as he approaches his opponent and delivers a knockout blow. Rather than waiting for the judge's verdict, Tommy exits the cage like a boss, breaking yet another rule. Brendan is the next fighter to enter the cage, and Frank helps him to compose himself and focus on the task at hand. As Beethoven's music begins to play, Brendan makes his entrance into the cage. Patty encourages him to win, but the commentators are less optimistic, declaring that Brendan is not a real fighter and comparing him to a goldfish thrown into a shark tank. The fight begins, and Brendan quickly finds himself on the receiving end of some punishing blows. He is thrown around the cage as anxious supporters look on. Brendan becomes caught in a chokehold and is struggling to stay afloat with only 10 seconds left in the first round. Frank yells at him not to tap out, and Brendan manages to hold on until the round ends. Jess, who has been worriedly waiting for a text from Brendan with the results of the fight, still refuses to watch the game. In the second round of the fight, Brendan and his opponent exchange punches, but Brendan manages to take the upper hand by securing an arm lock. The commentators are surprised by Brendan's performance, and Paddy mumbles to himself that Brendan can do it. Ultimately, Brendan's opponent taps out, giving Brendan his first win in the Sparta tournament. Joe is overjoyed at Brendan's victory, and Brendan shows great sportsmanship in his victory. The commentators remain skeptical, believing that Brendan's win was a fluke. Jess, who has been anxiously waiting for news from Brendan, finally receives a message from him saying, "I won." She is happy for him and relieved that he is okay. As the Sparta tournament continues, the field narrows to only 8 fighters, and then to 7 as Koba decimates his opponent. Jess, who can no longer bear to sit and wait, decides to watch the fight. She witnesses Brendan barely survive the first round and then take control of the match by securing an arm lock on his opponent. He forces his opponent to tap out, earning another win for the physics teacher. Tommy, like Koba, dominates his opponent and advances to the final 4 by destroying his opponent in just 10 seconds. He remains a formidable force in the Sparta tournament, and his reputation as a skilled fighter continues to grow. As the Sparta tournament nears its conclusion, Tommy finds himself unable to sleep. Paddy approaches him, expressing his pride in what Tommy did for the soldier in Iraq. However, Tommy reveals that he is not proud of himself because he deserted from his unit and just happened to be in the right place at the right time. Despite Paddy's efforts to understand Tommy and his motivations, Tommy remains distant and dismissive, telling Paddy to spare him the father routine and stating that he liked him better when he was a drunk. It becomes clear that the only thing Tommy and Brendan have in common is their lack of respect for Paddy. Tommy sends Pops packing, telling him that he has no use for him. Paddy's rejection by Tommy breaks him, and he reverts to his old, drunken self, muttering nonsense from his audio recording. Guilt-ridden, Tommy hugs Paddy and tries to comfort him. When the time comes for the final round of the Sparta tournament, only 4 fighters remain, and the crowd is overwhelmingly chanting Tommy's name. Today, Tommy fights without Paddy in his corner. His opponent, Mad Dog, is eager to avenge the humiliation he experienced at their sparring session and is confident that he will be the one to take down Tommy. The fight begins, and Mad Dog is immediately knocked down by Tommy. Tommy proceeds to destroy Mad Dog's face, with Colt screaming for the fight to be stopped. It is another quick victory for Tommy. Brendan's fight is against the Russian fighter Koba, who is the clear favorite. The odds are 1,000 to 1 that Brendan will win, and his wife Tess is there to cheer him on. As the fight begins, Koba quickly takes control, dealing massive damage to Brendan, who returns some punches but seems ineffective against the Russian fighter. Brendan is nearly knocked to the ground with each punch he receives, and Koba drops him to the ground and lands a few more blows before the first round ends. The second round starts in the same fashion, with Jess unable to watch the fight. Brendan is tossed around the cage like a rag doll as his students and Joe look on with concern. The second round comes to an end, and Frank tells Brendan that he will throw in the towel if they are not there to win. Brendan knows that the third round is his last chance to knock out Koba, or he will lose his house. The third round begins with determination in Brendan's eyes. Koba continues to pound on him and puts him in a chokehold, but Brendan manages to turn the situation around by throwing Koba over his head and securing a leg lock. Koba taps out, and the tournament favorite is eliminated from the competition. Brendan advances to the finals to face Tommy. Word begins to spread that Tommy had deserted from the military. If he wins the tournament, he plans to give the winnings to the wife of his fallen comrade. As the final match between Tommy and Brendan begins, the crowd realizes that the two are brothers fighting against each other. Brendan has the support of everyone around him, while Tommy fights alone. Tommy starts the fight with precise and sharp movements, beating up Brendan and throwing him to the ground. After the end of the first round, Tommy lands a punch on Brendan that the crowd considers to be foul play. Frank calms Brendan down and gives him some pointers for the next round, encouraging him to move more. The second round begins with a fierce exchange of punches, which Tommy clearly wins as he keeps Brendan pinned to the ground. As the third round begins, Tommy again manages to get on top of Brendan, but this time, he is quickly taken down with an insane arm lock. Tommy screams out in pain, but he refuses to give up. Brendan dislocates Tommy's shoulder to end the round, and before the start of the next round, he asks Tommy if he's crazy to continue fighting with a dislocated shoulder. However, Tommy doesn't seem to care and appears to be punishing himself for something. Brendan starts to refuse to fight his brother. Paddy arrives at the stadium and sees his two sons in a terrible situation. It's no longer a fight, but rather a one-man show with Brendan trying to get Tommy to surrender. However, Tommy refuses to give up, and the fourth round comes to an end. Paddy is heartbroken to see his sons in such a difficult situation and tries to intervene, hoping to find a way to end the fight peacefully. Paddy gives Brendan the approval he has always needed and still doesn't go to Tommy's corner as a trainer. Tommy, with no one on his side, is overwhelmed with emotions. Faced with Tommy's resistance, Brendan decides to end the fight. He knocks Tommy down and chokes him, asking for his forgiveness and telling him repeatedly that he loves him. Finally, Tommy taps out, and the fight comes to an end as Brendan helps his brother up and embraces him. His wife, children, and Joe are all overjoyed. Brendan has won the $5 million Sparta tournament and is finally able to provide for his family. The fight has brought a torn family back together, and Brendan tells Tommy that he always wants to be there for him. Paddy watches from the sidelines, proud of his sons and grateful for the opportunity to reunite with them. The family leaves the stadium together, ready to start a new chapter in their lives. The end. Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed this story and found it entertaining. If you'd like to see more videos like this, be sure to subscribe to our channel. We have a variety of content, and we're always looking for new and exciting stories to share with our audience. We appreciate your support, and we look forward to bringing you more great content in the future. Thank you again for watching and have a great day.